So Batman, for those of you who don't know, is a guy who dresses like a bat and fights crime, and he has ears like this. And Gerard Way also dresses like a bat sometimes, but he does so within the context of singing for his band, My Chemical Romance, which is probably what he's best known for. But not only is he a musician, he's a writer and artist as well. Within the realm of comic books, he's widely respected, not because he's the lead singer of My Chemical Romance, but because he's just a great writer on his own. The best known comic that Gerard has worked on is probably Umbrella Academy, which he created, but he also worked on Doom Patrol for DC Comics, and he has his own DC imprint, Young Animal. And also he created the Spider-Man character, the girl with the big spider robot that shows up in the Spider-Verse movies. So I feel the need to tell you all that because whenever you hear about a celebrity stepping out of their realm and into someone else's, usually it's one of those things to where, oh, this famous person is using their fame to try to get their book published or something like that. And so whenever you hear that the lead singer of My Chemical Romance is a comic book writer, you might think that he's a comic book writer because of his fame, and he's not actually any good, but people are just buying his work because his name is on the cover and they're associating it with My Chemical Romance. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen. I'm not saying that people don't buy his work because he's from My Chemical Romance, because that's a large part of it, but also he's just great on his own. Even if he had never written a piece of music before, he would still be a great writer. And so I say all that because I need you to know that whenever I say that Gerard Way's Batman is the best comic never made, I'm not saying that because he's a singer. I'm saying that because he's a great writer and he has great ideas. So we don't actually know that much about Gerard Way's Batman. All that we know is the stuff that was posted to Twitter back in like 2013. So based off of some tweets, Gerard Way pitched Batman Kingdom of the Mad back in about 2008. It was pitched to DC, it was approved, and it was going to be a Vertigo book. Vertigo, for those of you who are unaware, is a mature reader's imprint at DC, or it was, rather. They shut it down, which, I cry about every now and then, but whatever. Vertigo Comics would publish Hellblazer, they would publish Swamp Thing, Why the Last Man, American Vampire, The Sandman, Lucifer. They would publish all these adult comics, stuff where the characters like swore and had sex and it was violent, and oftentimes it was political. But basically the idea behind it is that it was supposed to be a mature reader's book. But this Batman comic was going to be out of continuity, meaning that this wouldn't be the main Batman going forward or anything. It would just be a weird side story. It would be an Elseworlds title. But Elseworlds were stories that were alternate universe stories, so you'd have like Batman as a knight or Batman in like a Western setting or something of that nature. Two of my favorites were the Batman Thrill Killer books and the Batman Vampire books, which were great. So first I wanted to take a look at the characters that Gerard posted onto Twitter and the art that he posted for them. Then I wanted to talk about what happened to it, and then I wanted to talk about its future, if it has one. So first, taking a look at Batman, this would have been one of the craziest versions of Batman that we've ever seen. The premise is that Bruce Wayne, after his parents were killed, was thrown into Arkham Asylum, and I don't really know why you would throw a kid who's just gone through such a traumatic experience into an asylum, but whatever, it's just the way Gotham City is, I guess. So this version of Batman would have been crazy for a number of reasons. One of those reasons being his superpowers. And it's like, yeah, the entire appeal of Batman is that he doesn't have superpowers and he's just a guy. But in this comic, he would have had ESP, he would have been able to see into the future, and he would have been able to turn into a bat. But the thing is that only he would know about these powers, which I kind of love because it kind of turns into an unreliable narrator type thing where it's like, oh, is Batman crazy or does he actually have powers or whatever? I think it probably would have been the first one. I think he probably just would have been crazy, but it's a cool idea. I really love the idea of having a Batman that thinks he can actually turn into a bat, and also he thinks he is a bat. And in some of the concept art, Batman's shown to be sleeping upside down like a bat. And also he eats rats because bats eat rats, I guess. I don't think they do, but in this they do. One of the craziest details about this Batman is that on the inside of his cape, he would have had a map of his own version of heaven, and it's just so out there, and I love it. I love it because it's not a Batman thing at all. To have a map of your own version of heaven on the inside of your superhero cape, it's like, it's crazy. I love it. I love it because it's so absurd. It's so far removed from our versions of Batman that we know and love, and so that's what makes it special to me, I think, is just the fact it is so different, but it feels like it has some kind of substance. Also on his cape was a Crusader cross, and he would have had the Robert Pattinson eye makeup, but of course this pitch was done in 2008, so a good 15 years before the Pattinson Batman movie. He also would have had a lock on his suit. I don't really know if that symbolizes anything, but I dig it. And also his face would have been all scarred and messed up, and yeah, it's just a very different version of Batman than what we're used to. Honestly, all of this craziness alone might be too much for some people. It might be enough to turn them off of this concept of Batman entirely, but if you're like me, then you're intrigued by it and you're like, okay, I actually want to read this Batman comic. Then next up you have the Joker, who is going to be 19 in this comic. I couldn't find out how old Batman is supposed to be, but yeah, Joker's 19, so he's a literal teenager. And he was going to have black hair, black rings around the eyes, black lips. Whenever I see this picture of Joker, I can't help but think of Robert Smith. And so part of me feels like that's probably what Gerard Way was going for. This version of Joker has a kid's Dracula mask, which is one of my favorite details, just because, again, it is so different from what you're used to with the Joker. And also he's dressed in patient's clothes, just because he's, you know, a kid at the asylum. Whenever I think of this comic, this is always the first detail that comes to mind because of how crazy it is. Mr. Freeze's suit would have been made out of the wreckage of his wife's deadly car crash that killed her. And so I don't know why you would make a Freeze suit out of the car that your wife died in, but it's just so crazy, and so I love it because of that. This version of Riddler is really interesting because the Riddler has a mask, and the Riddler doesn't really have a mask, you know, until, again, the Pattinson Batman movie. There's a painting that's mentioned in the notes for the Riddler, and I had to look it up because I didn't know it by name. But anyways, it's this one, the guy with the apple in front of his face, and that was Gerard's inspiration for the Riddler. Or actually, inspiration might be the wrong word. Maybe it was just a point of reference to use for the Riddler's costume, because the Riddler has the same kind of bowling hat as the figure in the painting. I saw online where someone said that this Riddler design reminded them of Rorschach from Watchmen, but I really dig the question mark Riddler mask, and I think that one really cool thing about this is the fact that if you look at Gerard Way's notes for a lot of these characters, he's not happy with the way that the designs look. So with the Riddler, if you read the notes, Gerard wanted to give the Riddler a black hat and make his clothes darker overall. And I don't know what the final book would have looked like, but I really love these concept art pages with their very muted colors, because it would have given the story a very simple but unique look. There's a page of concept art for the Penguin, where Gerard just says that the Penguin needs to be scarier, and calls the Penguin an honorable judge, which I assume is sarcastic. But I love the idea of taking a penguin that already has like razor sharp teeth and just trying to make him scarier. Gerard said that there wouldn't be a Harley Quinn in the book, but there would be a Catwoman who would have been very strange. There was one picture of Two-Face posted where it says that Two-Face is supposed to have blue skin, maybe. This version of Two-Face is interesting to me because I've always thought that he was supposed to be a cop, but someone posted that they think he was supposed to be an asylum guard. But regardless, the fact that he's not a lawyer is what makes him interesting. So I really would have liked to know how that change would play into the story. And then last but not least, we have Batman's sidekick, Robin, who Gerard described as being the only character who isn't completely nuts. I really dig the Robin gloves because they're very kind of ornate looking and stylish, and I don't know, I like them. Also, it seems like this Robin was supposed to be somewhat based off of Mikey Way, who's Gerard Way's younger brother. And this led me down a huge rabbit hole because Gerard on Twitter was like, yeah, you know, this Robin was kind of based off of Mikey, and even has Mikey's medal that Mikey had from the Black Parade. I guess I should mention this, Mikey Way also plays with Gerard in My Chemical Romance, and whenever they played the Black Parade album, they wore these costumes, and Mikey's had a medal. Like the kind of medal that you would be given for service in the military or something of that sort. And the reason why Mikey has a medal on his Black Parade uniform is because Mikey played a character who died in a music video that came out 2 years before the Black Parade for a song called The Ghost of You. And The Ghost of You was on 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge, which had nothing to do with the Black Parade. And so I don't really know what the connection is, but anyways, Mikey has a medal. And so I was like, okay, well, Mikey's medal on his Black Parade jacket is like a military type thing, but then Robin's is a bird. His medal is a bird, and so I'm like, why does Robin have a bird medal? And then I was like, oh, he has a bird medal because Gerard didn't want to do the classic Robin R, and so he replaced it with a bird medal, which was Mikey's medal, but now it's a Robin medal, and it's a really weird connection. But yeah, in my opinion, this Robin looks the most like an Umbrella Academy character. I think it's mostly just because of the mask, though, and also because Gerard Way drew it and did the original art for the Umbrella Academy. And this is one thing I've always wondered about. Would Gerard have drawn this comic? Because he would have written it, but would he have actually drawn it? If I had to bet money on it, I would say no. And the reason why is because Gerard hasn't actually drawn any of the comics he's written. He's always had other people do the art, and it makes sense because the art takes a long time. So this is a major misconception that a lot of people have. This series was never rejected by DC. It was never canceled by DC. Rather, it never got made because Gerard says that he got busy. And it makes sense to me because the pitch was approved in 2008, so Gerard would have been working on Umbrella Academy at the time, and also would have been recording conventional weapons, which would have then been canned, for lack of a better term, so that way they could make Danger Days, and then they would have toured Danger Days, and then the band would have tried to make a 5th record, and then they stopped making the 5th record, and then they broke up in early 2013, and then Gerard was talking about this in mid-2013, so I believe him when he says that he was busy. So that is the reason why this book was never made, was because of Gerard. And I don't say this like in a pointing a finger away and being like, Gerard, you held up this masterpiece, but, you know, just a lot of people blame DC for it, is what I'm trying to say. A lot of people think that the editors at DC rejected Gerard's pitch or some crap like that, but that's not what happened. So I really love this take on Batman because it's so different from what we're used to, and so it just looks like a kind of complete vision. It looks like a completely different version of Batman, but it looks like its own unique, cohesive vision that would have been something special. None of the ideas here strike me as things that were, you know, put in by editors or the people trying to sell the comic. It just seemed like Gerard was just kind of making stuff up and being like, oh, what if Batman had ESP? What if Mr. Freeze made his suit out of the wreckage of his wife's car crash? And it's just all these crazy ideas, and they all come together, and it just is unlike anything else I've ever seen related to Batman. And also, I just really love the goth looking designs. I undeniably prefer a more gothy Batman as opposed to a more realistic Batman. And like I was saying at the beginning, Gerard Way is a great writer. And so if this comic had actually been made, could it have bombed? Could it have been garbage? Yeah, it could have been, but also it could have been amazing. I mean, the fact of the matter is that I read about it for the first time like 7 or 8 years ago, and it has been in my head ever since. So basically, Gerard posted all of this stuff, all these pictures and thoughts onto Twitter in 2013, and then can't find anything else after that until 2017, when Gerard is talking about his Young Animal imprint, and he's asked about writing Batman, and says that he doesn't want to mess with the darkness, essentially. He didn't feel like he was in a dark enough place to write Batman, and so he didn't want to kind of embrace that darkness. And if you look at all the books that Gerard was associated with at this time, all those Young Animal books, there isn't anything particularly edgy or super grimdark or anything like that. It's all pretty colorful. So Gerard didn't want to mess with it in 2017, but also he said that they weren't planning on reuniting My Chemical Romance, so things change. And especially with the reunited My Chemical Romance, they've only released 1 song at the time of recording since coming back, and it was The Foundations of Decay, which is among their darkest work. And honestly, it might be my favorite song that My Chemical Romance has ever put out. And so there's been this question in my mind for a while. Is Gerard ready to embrace the darkness, or however you want to phrase it now? Is he in a place where he can write this Batman comic? And I don't know the answer to that. So I'll ask another question. Do I think this book will ever come out? And the answer is probably not. Honestly, I don't really expect it to come out ever, and that makes me sad to say, but my reasoning for that is simple, which is just that it's been 15 years since this comic was approved, and it hasn't ever come out. And so at this point, I can't help but feel that it's probably not a time issue so much as it's probably an interest issue, because it's like, I don't know how much of an interest I have in stuff that I was doing 15 years ago. You grow and you change as a person, and so if Gerard were to write Batman now, it might look completely different, or maybe it could look the exact same. I honestly have no clue, and I don't really care to speak too much more on this because it feels like I'm just kind of speculating on Gerard's state of mind or whatever, and that's weird. But if for no other reason, then I would be skeptical of this book coming out simply because of the fact that Gerard posted all this stuff to Twitter. Because it doesn't make sense to me that you would start telling people about your project and showing off concept art if you actually intended to make the thing, because wouldn't you want to just make the thing and show them the final product as opposed to the stages of development that you're going through? And again, I don't really know what Gerard was thinking or why this comic never got made or whatever, but I will say this, Gerard, if you ever need help writing this comic, call me. So yeah, that's Batman Kingdom of the Mad, the greatest comic that Gerard Way never made. They did turn the Batman and Joker drawings that Gerard posted into figures, which look super cool, but also seem super expensive, so that's why I don't have them. So I would be interested in hearing what other people have to say about this. I saw where a lot of people online were talking about the Joker and how they just hated the Joker. They were on board with everything else about the comic, but they're like, a 19-year-old Joker without green hair and with black hair who looks kind of like Robert Smith, this is too far for me. And so I find that kind of hilarious, but I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that this comic actually would have been great? Or do you think it's a little too crazy for its own good? Do you think it belongs in the asylum, I guess is what I'm trying to ask. So thank you for watching and have a bat-tastic night, because that's what we're saying now. Bat-tastic, I love it. And contrary to popular belief, Gerard Way is someone different from me,